Y'all ready for this?
Oh,
Awesome.
Mark, what kind of walk-up music is that?
Well, it appears to be time for our very special event. And I'm Walt Morris, and I'm serving at this point in time as the chair of the Green Mountain Council Scouting Alumni and Friends. And we're very pleased to have with us tonight a very special guest. A couple things to say about our evening with Hawkeye. Way we'll proceed, because we got a big crowd ranging from, we got old hands, old outdoor hands, some end-to-enders of the lawn trail on board, plenty of experience. And we also have some brand new folks, which is really exciting. Just starting out with the scouting journey, which, by the way, never really ends, as our honored guest is a pure living example of. Because of the numbers, we're going to take your cursor and go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you'll see right there an icon with a balloon that says chat. So as we go, if you have things you want to contribute about your experiences or questions for Hawkeye, just drop them into the chat. It's as easy as can be. Brad Jenkins, who's showing on the screen there, at least my screen as well, will be monitoring the chat as we go. And Hawkeye and I will be taking some breaks to say to Brad, hey, Brad, what's happening in the chat? What are the themes? What are the points that anybody wants to have us all know about? Bring us up to date on that. So that's going to be the way to best participate tonight. If there's time at the tail end, we'll invite some folks, anybody who wants to be heard about a point. But the main way to go here with the size of the group is to use the chat function. You'll also see, I wanted to point out that we have Mark Saxon here as well with us tonight, our council executive, and he's serving as our Zoom webmaster. So we're relying on him for the technical side.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mark. So remember to use chat to participate, and I'll be saying that again a couple times. Back in August, I think it was on August 29th, our honored guest decided that he would take it upon himself to walk the long trail end to end on behalf of the council and camping in the council. Most of us know him, and if you don't know him, Clint Hawkeye Buxton has been around the block, and Mark's holding up a little icon that was very familiar to a lot of you as you joined up with Clint on the trail in his awesome summer experience. He's been around for quite a while. Well, I won't steal his thunder as far as this whole scouting bio, but I will just say long enough to have served a number of years as the camp director at Norris, to have been intensely involved in training efforts for the council. And they have, as a primary characteristic, just a real cheerful spirit that goes with scouting, of course, and as a person who exemplifies all of the best that is in scouting. So I'm going to be quiet and let us all join with Clint, or Hawkeye Buxton, in his presentation. And I just want to start by saying, Clint, where does the Hawkeye come from? And how did you hatch this plan? And go for the rest of it. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Walt, for that. I can't believe that 48 plus people don't have something better to do tonight than listen to me. But I am seeing a few familiar faces on at least this page, anyways, and I'm sure to get heckled tonight. I'm quite confident of that. So we'll see how this goes. But so Hawkeye, how did that happen? Well, the guy that actually kind of gave me that name is on the screen, and it kind of comes from my involvement in Troop 23 here in Richmond. And I was an EMT for a couple decades on the rescue squad here in Richmond, and have patched up a number of scouts along the way. And that is along with the Last of the Mohicans. I think that's kind of how Bill decided to give me that name. So it's kind of stuck since the early 2000s, and that's how I got my trail name. And I'll have a little bit more on trail names here coming up in the presentation. So,
Okay.
and Walt, as far as how this was all born, pretty much I suddenly found myself unemployed this summer as the camp director at Mount Norris. And so I turned to my bride and said, this might be the year in which to do this crazy thing of walking the long trail. And it's really been it's really been on my bucket list since I was a scout. I've lived in Richmond all my life, and the long trail is just out my back door, and we did quite a bit of hiking as a scout troop. And I actually the first time I got on the long trail for overnight anyways was the Cochrane ski area. They were running a summer camp, and a bunch of us went and hiked the Monroe skyline, which I'll talk about a little bit here later too. And spent the first night at Theron Dean Shelter, and I kind of was hooked on shelters from that point on. And that's how I got, and how it kind of inspired me. And so when I lost the camp this summer, my wife and I were out in North Dakota quarantining, helping out my son and daughter-in-law and our new granddaughter. And so I began to walk around for the month of June, and there's not a lot of terrain in North Dakota, but I walked long distances, and so when I got back, I began in earnest to start walking our Green Mountains and starting to do a bit of training. Then I was kind of I hadn't quite made the decision yet, Walt, to actually make the hike. I was progressing in my decision making, and Troop 23 in Richmond, they're stewards of a piece of the long trail from Camel's Hump. They're about 1.5 miles of trail that we maintain. And so on the 18th of July, a few of us started out and do a little trail clearing, and I kind of use that 8 miles as, is this something I want to do, and so on. And when I got back, I had terrible toe jam, and my feet hurt like the blazes and whatnot. I said, well, maybe this is not such a good idea. But then I went down to see Philip down at REI, and he turned me on to a couple of boot fitters, and I got that one straightened out. So towards the end of July anyways, I was pretty confident that I was going to make this thing happen. And our scout executive, Mr. Saxon, hadn't quite arrived in Vermont yet. And so I wrote him an email and said, hey, Mark, I'm thinking about doing this walk, and I'd like to use it kind of as a promotion for scouting and see what we can do. And when Mark arrived here, he invited me up to the office, and we kind of sat down, and he said to me, he says, so you're thinking about doing this like this coming spring, something of that nature? And no, in about 2 weeks. So Mark's wheels started turning, and he pulled out his yellow pad of paper and started a marketing thrust. And so I think towards the end of this, I'll share with you how that came out as well. But from a fundraising and promotion of scouting, he really promoted this three-legged stool of adventure, fundraising, and camp promotion. So that's kind of how it all started. And I announced my intentions at the council summit that we had up in Barrie on the 15th of August. And then at that point in time, I really couldn't go back on that. So that's how I got to where I am today, Walt. How's that sound?
Okay, that sounds really good. So go for it. Tell us about your journey. Tell us about the Majesty. Tell us about do's and don'ts, gear,
All right.
and all the rest.
Very good, sir. So I'm not going to, I'm not one of those presenters that's gonna, I took about 750 pictures on this trip and whatnot, and I'm not gonna have you go through all 750. I'm hopefully I whittled that down to about 40 or 50 pictures, and so it's not gonna be one of those long, arduous slideshows. So let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Walt. So I'm up and running then. Okay. So this presentation, I'm going to go, as Walt said, some of the grandeur that I experienced and some of the mistakes I made and close calls and decision making and fun that I had and so on. So at the beginning, anyways, this again, as Walt said, I started on the 29th of August, and my plan was to go about 10 miles a day and interact with as many scouts as I could, and friends and people that wanted to join me on the trip. And I think I was fairly successful with that. So with that, I started, the alarm clock went off at 5 or probably 4:30 here in Richmond, and Margaret started driving me down to North Adams, Massachusetts. I like always, when there's a big trip, you never get a real good night's sleep, and I might have had 2 or 3 hours, something of that nature. And but anyways, on the way down, I was doing final food prep and that type of thing, and there was some pretty torrential downpours, and as you can see by the graphic, hurricane or tropical depression, I guess at that point in time, Laura, was going just south of us. But she was spinning up some pretty heavy rains and torrential downpours. And so as we were driving down Route 7, I could look up in the darkness at the ridge line and see the lightning going on early in the morning. And we kind of looked at each other a few times. Is this the right way to do things? But it proved to be okay. My dad's always believed in the adage of rain before 7, stop before 11. So we were hopeful, and we got down to North Adams, Massachusetts, and indeed it was a drizzle down there, and things had kind of stopped. So I did don my rain jacket and backpack and began the trip about a little after 9, I think, is when we started to walk up the trail. So the next thing, and really it did kind of clear up for the balance of the day. I had some nice sunshine, and the very, very southern part of the long trail is dotted with power line crossings and beaver ponds and whatnot. And there's a place called Stamford Meadows, and it's a fairly large area around Lake Hancock that's got a lot of flat terrain. And there was some just gorgeous sites that I might have used for tenting, but I wanted to get a little bit more mileage. So I kept pushing, and about 4 o'clock, I began to hear some rumbling in the distance, and I didn't know it at the time, but you can see by this graphic in the upper left, anyways, that the guy's pointing at Stamford, and Stamford Meadows is somewhere in this area here, and you can see up in the upper left as those were tornado warnings that were going on. And I really didn't know that until I got down to Route 9 the next day, and Troop 353 from Bennington kind of let me know what was going on. I did have some darn good boomers that night, but I had set my tarp up because I'm a hammock camper. I had set my tarp up about 20 minutes before the rain started. I found a perfect site. So I battened down the hatches and had the rain go through. In about an hour, I was able to cook dinner and and then hang my hammock, and the rest of the night was fairly pleasant. So that was my kind of my first introduction anyways to the long trail as far as this particular trip anyways. I then began to walk north, and you can see in the lower right anyways, that's a picture from Harmon Hill that overlooks Bennington, and just a gorgeous day that day, and it's a nice flat area. But then one has to go down to Route 9, and this is the very first, very precipitous drop on the LT going north. And there are some absolutely gorgeous stone steps that the Long Trail Patrol has put in a great deal of work. And I began to descend those steps, and probably was about halfway down when it was right around noontime. And I heard owls hooting, and I couldn't quite figure out what they were doing around noontime, but it turned out to be some of my wood badge patrollers, and Simon Drew had every turn he got to, he started hooting, and I was able to soon see down there that Troop 353 was coming up the hill in which to greet me, and we had a nice visit with a bunch of folks that were there, and we got down on the Route 9, and at that point in time, Billy Gillum, one of our district executives, was there, and he was hauling his trailer, and I'll show you a picture of his trailer. But in essence, he was hauling a lot of paraphernalia for Hawkeye's trip, recruiting information and that type of thing. And I had actually recruited him anyways to haul a couple of totes for me. One contained food and the other one contained equipment. And so I was able to kind of rearrange some of the equipment in my backpack on Route 9, and spent a couple hours with the Bennington troop, and swapping stories with them. And they had some scouts there, and they provided me with a very kind donation for the fundraising as well.
Clint, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How did you plot out where you would be camping each night, and how did that work out?
Yeah, well, that will become apparent. I did a bit of ad-libbing, Walt, throughout.
Good.
Throughout the trip, and many of my colleagues, friends that are close friends, that were on. Some of them are on this call. They were after an itinerary, and I was kind of able to give them, better every 10 miles. This is I was going to kind of stop for the night. I'll get to it in my gear section, but I was also wearing a Garmin InReach transponder, and my daughter, who lives in Madison, Wisconsin, was she gave indication to Margaret that it might be a good thing for everybody to know where Dad was, since he's 61 years old. So I rented one of those transponders, and every night I would ping my location so kind of people could see where I'm at. And that seemed to work out quite well. And quite a few Appalachian Trail hikers were using the same equipment as they proceeded on the AT. So it really, I had a cadence, Walt, but I didn't follow it all the time, depending on what the terrain and how many people I talked to and those type of things.
Yep. Joy of the journey.
Sometimes can happen that way, right?
Yep.
So then, I think it's important for those that haven't been on the Long Trail, or even those that have quite a bit. It's important to understand that the Long Trail is a neighborhood, and you don't think it's 272 miles long, but you do run with a group of people, and news gets shared up and down the trail, and of whether it's good water or bear problems, or those type of things. There's a lot of news that goes up and down the trail, and people are able to kind of communicate that way. I quickly learned, and I think was my second day. Yeah, my second day out. I soon found out, as I said, the three most feared words on this hike anyways were, "Are you Hawkeye?" And and this was the first time this, the picture up on the upper left is taken from Porcupine Lookout. It's just above Melville Nauman Shelter and just downhill from Goddard Shelter on Glastonbury Mountain. And this is a view I had from my hammock as I hung it that evening, and with a full moon, and it was quite gorgeous. The next morning, early, there was a couple hikers that were looking to make some mileage, but they stopped at Porcupine Lookout, and we had a bit of a visit, and that's where I first heard the darn question: "Are you Hawkeye?" And how do people know this? Do they talk to Simon or Mike, or I don't know, but the guy was into playing 20 questions, so I had to kind of prime him for the information, and it turns out that he was associated with Rescue Inc. out of Brattleboro, and Drew Hazelton had told him to keep an eye out for me. So, but his partner that was there, I told him that I was from Richmond, and this guy whose last name was Shakespeare, he says, "Do you know any Shakespeare's from Richmond?" And I said, "No, I don't live there all my life, but." Well, his first name was William, which was interesting. And he had lived there in the early 70s, and so he had also learned skiing at Cochrane's, and those degrees of separation were pretty narrow. But we began to talk anyways, and we somehow got on the topic of bus drivers, and we both had the same bus driver going to elementary school, and that was kind of interesting. And you never know who you're going to meet on the darn trail. So you can see the shadow of Glastonbury fire tower there. There's 3 fire towers that are on the LT. I decided to climb all of them. They were pretty good days for it. Well, Stratton wasn't all that good, but down here in Glastonbury was quite nice. And I had a beautiful view up north, trying to figure out where the trail was going, and it was quite spectacular. The tree that's depicted on the right-hand side of the screen has a little bit of an interesting story to it. That's a lightning strike. And a friend of mine, Chuck Gilroy, and I did a hike down south with our sons. We did a key swap. They went north and we went south. And this tree about 12 years ago was freshly hit by lightning. Probably had only been a week or so, about 12 years ago. And I found the same darn tree, and I thought that was pretty cool in which to see. So. The stories continue, folks, and on the left-hand side of this next slide, I kind of have a picture of a yellow birch tree with a piece of duct tape around it, and there's a story behind that. And I see Jeremy Schroff is on, so he knows where this trail is. Right behind the tree is a road called the Somerset Road, and it's a pretty darn good road, but I stopped there just to take my bearings, perhaps look at the map, and I looked down, and there was a cell phone, and I didn't quite know what to do with the cell phone, because you don't know if it was left by somebody who was going north or someone who was going south. So the best thing I could do was kind of leave it where I found it, and so I took some duct tape off my trekking poles, and I just finished my lunch with a tuna bag, and I slipped that tuna bag over the top of that cell phone to protect it from the weather, and I kind of made it apparent to people that it was known. And I figured that was my good turn for the day, and it turns out anyways, again, news travels up and down the trail pretty well, and well, 4 or 5 days later anyways, I learned that it had actually found its way back to its proper owner, and so you never know what you're going to kind of come upon. That is a picture of the Stratton Fire Tower. I did not have a view that day. The wind was pretty whipping, but it was I climbed up and took a couple pictures, and you'll see on the top right anyways, there's my tarp is up, and for the first few days anyways, I decided to do stealth camping, and I didn't stay in shelters on this trek, primarily because of the COVID pandemic, and I didn't want to So I hung my hammock either outside of shelters, or I found a place in the woods and did some stealth camping in which to do that. So that's kind of the way I approached my camping. And this one here is shortly after I left Jeremy. I got to the foot of Stratton Mountain and it was getting dark, and so I put up my tarp and hung my hammock and spent the night close to the International Paper Road that was right there at the foot of Stratton Mountain. So, okay, is everybody asleep yet? All right, let's talk about food. What did I do for food? Well, the first thing I did is I went to Costco's and I bought me a whole bunch of food. And you can see it there in the back of the trunk of the car. And I began to divvy it up. And that's why I had a food tote that kind of followed me along as well. And the upper right is, you can see some Mountain House meals in there, and some tuna bags, chicken bags. They've done an awful lot with those tuna and chicken and whatnot in the bags, and a lot of backpackers are using those now. Just on the top, just kind of peeking out, I did buy some that powder you can pour in a drink to help you with your electrolytes and that type of thing. But primarily breakfast throughout the entire trip, it was pretty much 27 days of oatmeal, and I had a cup of tea every morning, and then some of these protein bars or trail mix and that type of thing. I really didn't necessarily stop for lunch. I more along the lines, I have a backpack that has a couple side pockets in the hip belt, and I'd stuff those full of Cliff bars or Laura bars or Kind bars, or those type of things, and I pretty much snack as I went along the trail and eat when I was hungry. Dinner, on the other hand, primarily was Mountain House meals, or I had some Philmont meals left over. I actually had an expired Philmont meal that was pretty darn tasty. Or I supplemented with pasta sides, and in that tub you can see some pasta sides, some potatoes, and that type of thing that I kind of brought along with me. And I averaged about 3 liters of water per day. I'll talk a little bit later about water, but it was the temperatures that I experienced on the LT in September. If you guys remember that, they weren't terribly warm. I didn't have a lot of sweating going on and that type of thing. So that worked out. That worked out pretty well as far as about an average of 3 liters, and I include my my water consumption plus my cooking at night and a cup of tea in the morning. So I'll stop there. Walt, is there any?
So Clint, just
questions?
There's been some points made here. I've been seeing on the chat. Brad, do you have any food comments at this point on the chat?
There's no questions, but there are definitely some comments. One of them was that Noom is very good. Didn't mention your Philmont meals, so someone did mention, asked if there were any surplus meals.
Yeah, Brad, the thing about the surplus meals for Philmont, and if it's a good a tip for scouters and whatnot, especially a troop that's going out. In fact, they're probably still selling them now. They once the season ends out in Philmont, and of course it was canceled this year, so they had a fire sale going on, but they sell all their Philmont meals surplus anyways to people that want them. A couple points on that, and I did use some of the menus for Philmont to kind of construct my menus, and primarily because Philmont does a great job with nutrition, and they have a nutritionist that's looks over all their food and make sure you got the right amount of carbs and protein and that type of thing. Because depending on your body type and all that jazz, you're probably going to be burning 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, and you got to keep the furnace going, as I learned certainly in the northern part of the trek when it started to get colder. The one other thing about Philmont meals, they come set up for 2 people. So you just keep that in mind as you perhaps buy the Philmont meals, that they're set up breakfast, lunch, and dinners for 2 scouts or two hikers, and that's kind of how that works. So, anything else, Brad,
So
that's
Clint-
popping up there?
Nothing else about food, but we did have a question from Matthew. I know you're going to get to equipment shortly. He asked, did you have any equipment failures early on? And if so, what were they?
I didn't have any equipment failures early on. No, I think everything worked well. I did have the one you saw my tarp that I use for my hammock. It's a sill nylon tarp, and actually our troop back in Tom Collins got us involved in making hammocks back in the mid 2000s, and that's a hammock that that I made. But it's a sill nylon fly that goes over the top of it, and it's quite lightweight. I needed probably wish to do a better job at seam sealing on that. It had been a while since I had done that, so that my tornado warning storm that came through, I did get a little bit of leakage in that regard. But when I took my Nero day, like on day 16 at home, I redid all my seams on that, so that worked out pretty well. So okay,
So Clint, on the food, couple things.
yeah.
At least the picture is showing that you're relying pretty much on what can come out of a grocery store. Did you use Mountain House and the like a lot or not so much? And then I don't see any chocolate or jerky or anything like that. What about that?
There should be jerky. I think that's jerky right there, Walt. That I bought a couple of those. So yeah, I did pay attention to some of those meat. I had a bunch of Slim Jims with me, and I think you see, I'm dipping it in maple syrup in one of my pictures, but yeah, to your point, Walt, and I think that's our troop. Chuck Gilroy was kind of the leader on most of our 50 milers, and that was exactly the point. Is that you can go into the grocery store and or Costco's and just repackage things, and you can come up with some pretty decent meals to do it. And I'll get into cooking here in another slide, but as you can see probably by this, all I did, guys, was boil water, and it wasn't anything too fancy. So
Amazing how delicious something like that can be at the end of the day.
oh yeah, in the outdoors, that's for sure.
So do you have any tips? You mentioned the 50 miler for a unit leader thinking of taking his guys that are, and women, young men and young women out on the trail. What about I don't eat that, and how we deal with that as a unit leader? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's been
Maybe there's no answer.
been my experience, and many probably share this type of thing, is and we actually saw Troop 116. I was with them for a few days doing backpacking merit badge, and we did have dare I say, a bit of a finicky eater. But it's amazing what walking up and down a mountain will do for an appetite. And those things that are slightly unpalatable are all of a sudden taste pretty darn good. You do have to obviously pay attention to food allergies and sensitivities and that type of thing, but that can all be done in the pre-work of a hike. So, but that's that's a little bit on the food.
All right.
And you can see just one other point on the lower right hand side. You see my chili mac that I was eating with just absolutely best seat in the house. No restaurant could have a better seat than this, looking over Prospect Rock over the city or the town of Manchester, Vermont. And that was quite gorgeous that evening. And if you do it right, and they teach you how to do this in Philmont, if you do it right, I did not bring a bowl with me. And I'll show you later, the one and only utensil I had was a spoon. I did have a knife with me on a small multi-tool, but pretty much eat right out of the bag, and you don't have an awful lot of dishes to do. So that's a little backpacking 101. Hey, the next day, I got to meet Troop 428, met me at Route Route 11 and 30, and Ashley and the boys and a young lady went up with us up to Bromley, and we had a great hike. I was joined by a good friend of mine, Randy, who surprised me driving in the parking lot, and we had a great chat up Bromley, catching up on old times. And I'll just let you know that wasn't the last time I saw him either. He got kind of hooked into the LT a little bit, so he'll appear in other pictures. But so the hike up Bromley was great. It was, the troop did well. When I was at the bottom of it, Walt, because I had lots of this Costco food in my food tote, I decided to myself, I said, I'm going to open up the food tote for the scouts and see if they want anything. Well, they weren't shy, and they jumped right into the food tote, and they took all my Pop-Tarts. So I didn't have any Pop-Tarts for the rest of the trip, but that was okay, because they obviously wanted them. But we had a great time hiking up Bromley. It was decent weather, and you can see by the picture in the upper right that they found some burdocks, and they had I believe they had some type of it wasn't a snowball fight, probably a burdock throwing at each other on the way down, and but they had a great time and up there. I show a picture of the privy because that's a high altitude privy on Bromley Mountain, and the Long Trail, the Green Mountain Club in general, does a great job with privies on the trail. So if anybody is kind of squeamish about that, I would tell you that they are far better than most portalets that you encounter these days. So this one here, you can see the base of it anyways. It has a composting component to it, and they do a great job with the Long Trail Patrol and maintaining those. And privies are a wonderful thing. The troop left me, and then my phone rang, and it was a Rutland Herald. And I've never had an interview with a newspaper person before, and to have that up on top of Bromley was kind of interesting. But I think I told them when I needed to, and so Mark's plan on marketing, and Billy was connecting me with lots of people and whatnot, and so people began to learn about the hike and the Hawkeye. Many of the folks that are on the call anyways that were hiking with me start to roll their eyes, but that's when it began to build steam a little bit. I also ran into a lot of what I call trail dragons. I just love these little guys. These are red-spotted newts, or Fs. And I learned quite a bit about them. There was a great number of them on the trail, and it was a wonder to see them. And I kept sending pictures to my 18-month-old granddaughter out in Bismarck to keep her engaged with the wildlife on the trail. That was a lot of fun in which to see the trail dragons. I got to I had been thinking about this place for some time. This is called Little Rock Pond, and it is absolutely gorgeous there, folks. If you get the chance to get to Little Rock Pond, don't miss it, because it's a wonderful spot. It's a well-loved trail up there. It's not, there's a lot of people that accesses. I think it's 1.5 miles or so up into this pond. A few years back, we actually saw a guy, hauling a kayak up there to go paddling around. But I spent the evening there. I talked to, I think his name was Brian, was a caretaker. He was a recent graduate from NVU up in Linden. And he got the choice job of being caretaker down at Little Rock Pond. And the first thing he did was educate me on these red-spotted newts that I enjoyed so much. And if I remembered my high school biology, I forgot it all. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner, anyways, that's a red-spotted newt in their aquatic phase. And so that was kind of neat to learn a little bit more about those folks. Brian, I told him I was hammock camping, and so he said, go ahead, you're a low impact camper, so go ahead and duck the rope and find the trees over there. So where most of the folks that had to use tents and whatnot had to go about another half mile and maybe a third of a mile. I got a choice spot in which to set up my hammock for the evening. It wasn't without its problems, however. I had been looking forward to this swim, and you can swim in this pond. I had been looking forward to the swim for quite some time, and I set my backpack on the shoreline and went out and got my head wet, and gosh, that felt awful good. I got back just a few minutes later, and a chipmunk had got into my side pocket of my brand new backpack and shredded the zipper in good shape. So he was a pretty bold little bugger. He kind of hung around. And I swatted at him a few times, but he'd already done his damage and got my peanuts. And I learned my lesson that don't leave things unattended near Little Rock Pond anyway. So that was that little bit there, and spent the morning there. Just a gorgeous spot. You can see these are some other vistas around Little Rock Pond. The trail goes deep into the wilderness, but there on the upper left is a stone wall where our ancestors farmed and whatnot. It's quite interesting where you come upon stone walls in the wilderness here. The picture of the sunset, it's another spot that I hung my hammock on a peak called Stiles Peak, and I had a absolute gorgeous view of the sunset and the moonrise and then the sunrise the next day, and I was quite fortunate. And that wall goes to the point where I didn't go with a cadence all the time, because hammock camping allowed me that flexibility. As long as I had a tree that was 12, 15 feet apart, two trees, 12 or 15 feet apart, I could hang my hammock in good shape there. So that's a little bit about that. And some of you have probably hiked this area, but the photo on the right is White Rocks, where this is not the best example of leave no trace. People have stacked rock cairns all over the place, and perhaps they've overdone it a bit, but that's a little bit of that action there. And you can see down on the left-hand corner, that's a little bit of Billy's trailer that he would haul around with some of my equipment in it. And he had a map that kept track of me and so on. And you could see a lot of scout recruiting signs. So we were trying to get the message out to the community as he drove his car and trailer around, that something was happening that was special with the scouts. So
yes, it was.
Anything from the chat that I can answer at this point in time, or are we quiet there?
I'll ask Brad about that.
So far it's pretty quiet.
Okay.
The equipment failure, someone did mention about a shoe missing, and they mentioned about the chipmunk too. So
yeah.
Was there a story about a missing croc?
It's got to be Baker. Geez. That's a little farther north than this, but yes, right around Cooley Glen, I took my backpack off to get a snack out, and I discovered that I only had one croc, and it hasn't returned to me, so I'll just consider that one lost. But I guess that was an equipment failure in some regards anyways.
So I just had one thing, Clint, about when you were talking about the cadence of the trail and setting up your tarp as opposed to the shelter. Did you find, at least going by them, that they were pretty packed? Was it random? What was the scene? Were there a lot of people also tenting outside because of COVID?
Yeah, great points, Walt, and thank you for that segue. The southern part of Vermont, all the way up to Route 4, or just slightly north of Route 4, the Long Trail shares the same trail with the Appalachian Trail. And so at least for the first 100 miles, you get to interact with a fair amount of AT thru hikers, which they're it's a real cool thing to be able to talk to these folks that are headed. Now I was in September, so most of the AT hikers were actually coming south from Katahdin, and I'll chat about that in a few minutes when I get to trail names. But so yes, there was a number of folks that were on the AT, but as I take a look at that, at least the southern part of Vermont, it wasn't too crowded, Walt. I did have quite a busy night up at Round Top, north of Lamoille River, north of Route 15. But that was a Saturday, and it was there was young people kind of flocked in there a little bit. Everybody was safe. There was distancing that was going on, and I didn't see anything untoward as far as not following precautions and that type of thing. But there was a few other shelters that were a little crowded, and but nothing too bad. And again, I'll show a depiction, but I think I stealth camped for 10 or 11 nights that I wasn't around a shelter. But oftentimes around shelter are water sources, privies, that type of thing. So that's a important thing to do as well.
Yeah.
Then I was at Route 140. I was joined by a group of backpackers, and here you can see on the right-hand picture, anyways, that is the group of folks that were taking backpacking merit badge, and they were led by Brock Cannell and his wife Sarah, and Matt Maxim was there as well, helping as well. So they were teaching backpacking merit badge, and they allowed me to kind of walk with them, which was a great deal of fun. And we had several great days together. And just coming off White Rocks, again, I heard an owl hooting in the middle of the day, and it turned out to be Matt Maxim, who was coming up the trail. And pretty much the second thing he told me was this: I brought enough to make you a turkey dinner tonight. And you can kind of see that he did that. He had a solo stove that he fed twigs into, and excuse me, I ate like a king that night with a turkey dinner. But this group out of West Rutland, they learned a lot of things on the LT, and Brock and Sarah have done the long trail before. In fact, they're planning on doing it again this year to complete that from end to end. So it was a lot of fun with these folks. The first shelter we kind of stopped at was Minerva Hinchley, just north of Route 140, and there was quite a few folks there that night, Walt. Quite a few AT hikers, and I actually, by about that time, a group had started to form, about 6 or 8 people, including me. They were we didn't know each other. We had started a little bit different from North Adams, Massachusetts, but you found yourself at the same shelters, and so those folks were occupying the shelter. We had a tent site. Matt and I hung our hammocks out in the willywags a little bit, but that was a great evening of camaraderie with the troop, and teaching skills. There was a woman by the name, her trail name was Starbucks, I think, and she had been affiliated with Scouts in the past, and she wanted to hear songs from the boys. So the boys got up in the morning and sang them the birdie song at a pretty high volume, and they were pretty taken with that. So that was kind of neat. I touched on trail names, and what you see in this, I guess they call it a word cloud. What you see in this word cloud a little bit are some of the trail names that I encountered on the trail. And I just want to go over a couple of them because it's kind of interesting. This first one called French Press, and if I go back one, Matt was who cooked the turkey dinner. He also decided in which to make coffee for the folks in the shelter that morning, and so they dubbed him French Press, and so that became his that became his hiking name, and it kind of stuck. And I think Matt kind of liked that. He's a kind of a servant leader, so that worked out pretty well for him. The other one, a few of them I want to point out here, but this one, Toothless, and you can see Toothless is depicted here on the right. And that's a young man, Adam, from Troop 611 in South Burlington, and he is standing on top of Mount Abraham. And he got hungry that morning and decided to have himself a granola bar. And the granola bar apparently took out his molar that you can see holding. He's holding his molar in his hand there. And so a few of us, it was pretty easy to come up with his trail name, Toothless. He didn't seem to embrace it right off the bat, but once it caught on, he thought that was pretty cool. And now Adam will be forever known as Toothless on the LT. But we had a bunch of different folks that I ran into with different trail names. You got Bulldog. Bulldog is one of my old troop members, and his brother Sherpa. They were on a 50 miler with me. They actually met me near Bear Hollow and did a little hiking with me. It was great to see them. Oops, I must have gone wrong there. More cowbell. I didn't understand what that was all about, but apparently that's a nod to a Saturday Night Live skit that the guy really enjoyed. So he called himself More Cowbell. I got Ranger, and I saw Ranger is on the screen here tonight, and Randy joined me on Whiteface Mountain, and he actually got that name on the Appalachian Trail, and that was his trail name, along with a Scoutmaster from Troop 23 in Richmond, Chris. And Chris he was an AT through hiker as well. He had the name of Broken Arrow. Bumblebee, she was a nurse out of Michigan that came to Vermont, and she did something rather unique that I'll talk about in another slide here. But she did quite a bit of work on the LT. Free Sandwich, obviously that's pretty self-explanatory. Lucas was one of the guys I was kind of running with in southern Vermont, and he ended up at Appalachian Gap with all the hoopla as well. And every time he turned around, somebody was offering him a free sandwich, and his dog Charlie. And Sky Mall was one of the first folks I met on the AT. He was on that long trail. He was an AT through hiker, started in Katahdin on the 9th of July. And so he'd been about 2 months on the trail. He was doing about 13.5 miles a day. He got his name because he had lots of doodads on his straps. And so somebody named him Sky Mall. Heat Lightning, I ran into him actually in July on top of Camel's Hump when we were doing our trail maintenance. And he was a former staffer at Mount Norris. It was kind of neat. And I learned, I looked at his log, and he actually did make it through the through hike end to end. So it was kind of neat to see him. Clever Man, he kind of a sad story there. He's an Eagle Scout out of Connecticut. I had a great talks with him throughout the trip. But he actually came down with a groin injury, a cumulative one, just on the south side of Bolton Mountain, and he actually had to get off the trail. He was in his late 50s probably, but anyways, he kept me entertained in several different shelters, and I enjoyed my time with Clever Man a great deal. Captain, I've already mentioned him. He's on the screen tonight. Bill and his son Music Box, they completed a long trail a few years back as section hiking, and he plans to get back on the trail and do some more hiking as well. So I think those are some of the hang on, there's Big Stick. He was the only Vermont through hiker that I ran into. He's a young man out of Waterbury, and fabulous guy. I spent quite a bit of time with him as well, including a meal up at Buchanan Shelter that he'd done some fishing and some mushrooming, and he put on a heck of a good feast. And I'll talk a little bit more about his logistics as we go along. there was a couple other that I just wanted to mention, and I don't want to get too bad language here, but this Batsy, B-A-T-C, I ran into her just shy of Story Springs down in southern Vermont, and she was with Derby. And Derby was a young guy, probably in his mid 30s, and Batsy was over 70. And Batsy was, she was pretty spry, and she was doing section hiking, and Derby was going along with her to kind of facilitate the hiking and whatnot. And so I waded right in, as I always do. And I said, well, what does Batsy stand for? And she said, badass trail chick. And I thought that was pretty interesting coming from a 70-year-old. She had a lot to her. Prairie dog, unfortunately, on Stratton Mountain, he turned his ankle in some trail running shoes, and he had to get off the trail as well. And Spry and Pippin, they actually, I'll explain a little bit more what yellow blazing is, but they primarily skipped New Hampshire on the Appalachian Trail, and they were headed for Springer Mountain, Georgia. And the guy named Bunyan, we ran into him down just south of Killington, and he told the backpacking merit badge guys some really good stories about some mistakes he had made, not packing enough food for the 100-mile wilderness south of Katahdin and that type of thing. It's always good to have someone else kind of reinforce some of the things that scout leaders drill down on. So some great people out on the trail. And for those of you that have been on the trail and whatnot, this is what I mean about being a neighborhood or a community. There's really a great number of folks that are out there, all for the same reason. I never felt in danger or any of that. Lots of women on the hike, lots of young ladies on the hike, solo hiking. You really do watch out for each other on the trail. So that's a little bit on trail names. Walt, you got a question or other people too?
Actually, what you're saying about all these different people and their trail names and where they're coming from, it's my experience, you can go a long time before running into another Vermonter on the trail. And it just reinforces in my mind what an unbelievable gift we have to have this trail in our backyard that people travel all over the country to come to. Really amazing.
Yeah, they really do, Walt, and I'll tell a couple stories later on. But some people go to great lengths to get onto our long trail, and you're exactly right. We have a wonderful gift right in our backyard that was provided to us for sure. Any questions that Brad has? Anything that's popping up?
Yeah, Hawkeye. Brock and Sarah just wanted to mention that Megamind, Freight Train, and TUPT, T-U-P-T, all enjoyed their trip with you.
Yeah, in fact, how come they didn't make that? I think they're on another slide. Yeah, but Megamind is he took that from some Marvel comic or something, I guess. And Freight Train Nate's a pretty solid backpacker, so he earned that name pretty easily. And Tupt, turned up turtle, I think is what it is. And unfortunately, Sarah got that from some unfortunate fall on her backpacking trip. Although Brock had a good one just north of Clarendon as well that he avoided some injuries on.
A couple more comments where everyone's a little shocked that you've never heard the cowbell skit from a Saturday Night Live. And one last question is, did you catch any fish or collect any other wild edibles? And you seem to touch on that when you were talking about the fish and the mushrooms from the other hike.
Yeah. I'm not anywhere good enough to do any mushrooming. I did eat quite a few berries. Every time I crossed a power line, Brad, there was raspberries or blackberries there, and I would stop and have a bit of a feast in that regard. I didn't do any fishing. Big Stick had some luck down south, but perhaps that would have been better for me than all those darn bars I was eating. But that's how it ended up, anyways.
Yeah,
very good. I think that covers just about everything.
Okay, here's a couple other shots of the backpacking merit badge guys. The top one is on top of Killington, and you can see the top right. I think that's a stunning shot that goes up from Cooper Lodge, where we threw all our backpacks down on the tent platforms, and then we walked the 2/10 of a mile up to the top of the summit, and that's a pretty gnarly up to get to the top of Killington for 2/10 of a mile. But anyways, we did it and got to the top and had the mountain to ourselves until the gondola came up, and then the gondola people came out. And I got to tell you, the scouts along with me, we chuckled a little bit because the wind was up pretty good, and several baseball hats flew off from the gondola people, which was a little bit humorous. They were able to retrieve them, but yeah, that's and we were met with some trail magic. Matt rejoined, or French Press rejoined us on Cold Spring Road, something of that nature. He met us with some milk and clementines, and Chuck Gilroy drove down from Jonesville, and he had a box of Kind bars, and he kind of handed out. So we were getting a little trail magic down there for sure. The Goldenrod was just north of Clarendon. There's a gorgeous section, and it's pretty close to where we had a pretty good up coming out of that field. And Brock made one, or Megamind made one misstep and fell over on his backpack. Thankfully, his backpack broke his fall, and he was uninjured, other than his pride a little bit, I think. So on the top of Killington is the first time I got a chance to take a look north and see Camel Sump. So I could at least see close to home at that point in time. And coming down off of Killington, we were met by another group of friends. Rendy joined us. Rendy and his wife joined us for a few miles on that, and Rendy brought along cookies as well. And he got to be. Now I mentioned this word trail magic, and what is it? Primarily it's food or consumables that others trail angels will provide with you on the trail. And you see some examples here of a Klondike bar. When I got home, somebody had left me one of those for my Nero day, and somebody brought me in a Citizen cider all the way to Skyline Lodge. And this one in the middle was near Mad Tom Notch, and just before I went up Stiles Peak, and that's a regular occurrence that there's several gallons of good water that are left for hikers right there, where it's easy to get to. You can see in the top right, Mr. G was cooking up burgers for the backpacking merit badge right there on the side of Route 4. Put on a heck of a feed with burgers and all the fixings. He and Carrie put all that together, along with some strawberry rhubarb cheesecake. And oh my goodness, that was outstanding. And then on the bottom right, you can see our beloved ranger and his wife Julie. I stopped in at Mount Norris and for an evening, and they rolled out the carpet for me and gave me just a wonderful meal: bacon wrapped scallops and potatoes and steak tips and bread, lots of garlic bread. It was outstanding. So those of you who know what trail magic is, it's certainly it's a wonderful thing. Here's some other, and this is where Brock and Russ and Rendy will begin to roll their eyes a little bit, because every time you turn around, people were looking to give you something. And not only you had jugs of water, but Carrie Ann made me molasses cookies down in Clarendon. And I talked about Matt's turkey dinner, and Bill brought me some mango slices, and Rendy with his milk and homemade cookies, and clementines, Chuck with his Kind bars and the burgers. More cowbell that I actually got enough service so I could watch the skit. So I now know what it is when I was on the trail. More cowbell. We had a trivia contest at the David Logan shelter one night, and the prize was a zero gravity cone head, a warm cone head that I actually won that evening. So that was interesting. Sean Therian from Troop 539, he was cooking breakfast sandwiches on App Gap. And a point about that, folks, is it wasn't just for me. Anybody that was around, our trail mates, these 6 or 8 people that I was running with, they raved about the scouts and what they provided for them. You know, we were handing out cookies, and Sean was cooking up breakfast sandwiches. It was quite the event in which to do, and you'll see that, especially on the Appalachian Trail, where the people that have done it before or just want to be part of the trail will set up a grill and start cooking for through hikers. It's quite the neighborhood, quite the community, and homemade bread. I got a picture of tomatoes and pesto that John had provided me up on Burke Rock Mountain. And I said, with a good pour, and I'll give you a little indication that there was a little fruit of the vine that came with that pesto and tomato that was just outstanding. John and I were on Camel's Hump coming through, and there was a through hiker, a former through hiker. He had done it years ago, and he had stopped at the Cold Hollow cider mill up there on Route 100 in Waterbury, and he was handing out donuts to any through hikers that he would see. So we got a nice cider donut on top, and Barry Seamays had brought some apple and blueberry fritters from Yana's cupboard up in Jeffersonville when we hiked Laraway Mountain, and Margaret had brought up some cantaloupe and peaches on Plot Road, and I talked about the Norris feast that I had. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner. It was just outstanding. It wasn't all food, though. One of the great things that I really appreciated was Gordy turned on the hot water at the camp director cabin, and so I was able to take a nice hot shower, and that was quite stunning. And Deanna brought some pizza bread. And another one is it just doesn't have to be food. You can see down in the right-hand corner. Deanna brought along a book that she carried in Philmont, a Strength from Service, and a little spiritual to feed the soul out on the trail. That was kind of nice as well. I enjoyed that. And then there was, of course, chocolate pudding that Russ brought in to Skyline Lodge one night, and I have a picture on that as well that goes along with that. These are, I put together I kept track of the number of people that I interacted with, friends and scouts and troops and whatnot. And you can see a bunch of names that are here. I counted up, I'm somewhere over 98 people that either interacted or joined me or came out to see me or whatnot on the trek. And each one of them I thank from the bottom of my heart, because that was quite stimulating to keep everybody kind of going. It was great to see people out on the trail, for sure.
So Clint, on the food side,
yeah,
were there stretches of the trail that, as opposed to lots of trail magic, were more or less food deserts? And that's one question. And then how do you think the trip would have been better without the trail magic? I mean, it's kind of a loaded question, but could one do this, in your experience, without trail magic?
Yeah, oh gosh, yes, indeed, Walt. Great point. I certainly wasn't encouraging milk and cookies. People came out with them, I suppose. But I went stretches. I think the most I carried was about maybe 5 days of food through the Liebrook Wilderness, or Big Branch, or even Breadloaf Wilderness, where you're not crossing a lot of roads. But every few days, typically anyways, there'd be a road crossing, and Margaret would meet me. Billy would meet me with my food tote, because he was looking to market anyways, to try to get that next recruitment of folks in and whatnot. But most of my trail mates, Walt, would, like a bunch of them got off in Manchester and went down Route 30 and resupplied down at Hannaford's, or I talked about Bumblebee. She resupplied out of her car when she moved it. A lot of folks got off the trail at App Gap and went down into Waitsfield and resupplied. So there's those things that you can do if you're through hiking, for sure. But somewhere between 3 and 5 days is what the food I was kind of carrying, which came out to be 30, 35 pounds on my back. That was pretty good. So yes, you can do it without trail magic. It comes along once in a while, and I think
Good.
it came along more often than I certainly had expected it to. But be that as it may,
Yeah,
I wasn't going to turn it down.
no, sir. Yeah.
I got a few slides in here about folks that I kind of met along the way, and these are just some of the folks that you'll see. Captain's on the left, and Chuck and I hiked Philmont a couple of times on the right. Stu Stryker's dog, I can't remember if that's Autumn or Sky, but they met us on the bottom near Route 4, and then you got our beloved Commissioner Jeremy Schroff, who met me on the Kelly Stand Road in uniform, which was pretty amazing. Hopefully Jeremy's all shoveled out down there in West Wardsboro at this point in time, but just had great folks along the way. Here's one here, and then I'll stop and get anybody's input on this. Again, it was important for me anyways to not only promote scouting along this 270-mile walk, but also to understand what scouts have done for the trail. And I ran into a bunch of them, guys, and this is just a sample of them. But in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little story that goes behind this that Dick Seamays told me that years ago, I want to say he said 30 years ago, but there was a camp called Barrows Camp that was north of Route 15, and it's a camp that the Green Mountain Club got rid of, and so the Green Mountain Club wanted the picnic table moved from Barrows Camp to Little Round Top. Well, Troop 894 took on that task, and I think they came in from Plot Road a mile or so and carried in this picnic table that 30 years later is still there. It does look 30 years old, and I can see Dick Seamays kind of sitting at that table, but there's a scout project there. The privy that's in the middle, it kind of goes along with the plaque that's on the bottom right. Charlie Gilroy from our troop in Richmond put that privy up 18 years ago. And just about a month before I got there, they opened up a brand new moldering privy at David Logan. And so that's why you see the board across Charlie's privy. And I was able to, after about 20 minutes, I was able to extract the plaque off of Charlie's privy, and damn it, he had glued it on there as well. I think it was a bugger to get off, but anyways, I got the plaque back to Charlie since the privy is no longer in use. This one here in the middle is the porch at Taft Lodge on Mount Mansfield that Tyler McNanny from Milton had put together, and you can see here on the left is Buchanan Lodge around Bolton Mountain, where Troop 603 in Milton years ago had played a part in that. And there's projects all over the place. The David Logan roof was done by Stephen Miller out of Richmond, and numerous bridges. I know 627 out of Underhill has done a lot of bridges up in the Mansfield area, and puncheons are those boards that you walk on in wet areas. And scouts do a lot bringing that in, cleaning out water bars. As I said, Troop 23 maintains a section of Camel Sump. There's a lot that scouts can do and have done on the trail, and we Mark and I are working on rekindling a relationship with the Green Mountain Club, and we've actually the executive director up there is an Eagle Scout from, I think, Weybridge, Vermont. So we're eager to get back on his list, and perhaps we can do some mutually beneficial things. Brad,
yeah, I think
I'll stop there, Brad, and see if there's any other comments on that piece of the story.
Yeah, on your point, I think if everybody were to ask, raise your hands if you're a member of the Green Mountain Club and you're a registered member of the Boy Scouts of America, it'd be about half and half. I mean, it crossed so many crossovers. There's so many folks, and there's alums that are officers of the Green Mountain Club. We shouldn't be shy about getting in touch and working together.
Right.
Sorry, Brad.
That's all right. One of the first comments was, you may have been one of the first through hikers to actually gain weight on the trail.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a slide on that. Brock, Brock and Randy really did accuse me of that. But I ended up losing 15 pounds. So I must have been I gave away a lot of cookies. How does that sound? That sounds good. Yeah.
One actual question is, if you were to hike the long trail again, would you leave at the same time of year or make a change?
Wow. Okay. Great question. I absolutely loved September for a couple reasons. It was cooler. There was no bugs. In fact, when I got to my first equipment drop, I jettisoned my bug spray because I didn't need that 4 ounces, and I got rid of my sunscreen because the long trail is the big green tunnel, so you never get any sun. So I made a couple of adjustments there, but September was a great time in which to hike because of that. You know, the springtime can be kind of muddy. You know, I think they want you off the long trail until Memorial Day because of the higher elevation stuff. So the month of June, there's a lot of traffic on the trail. And of course, summertime with kids out of school, although maybe that wasn't such a big deal this year. I really did enjoy September, Brad. I have a slide on, it does get cold in September, but primarily it was a wonderful month to hike. And even Little Rock Pond was nice swimming. I swam a few times, and that worked out pretty well too. So I do it again.
Wonderful. I think that's it.
Okay.
All right. So,
Yeah.
we got about 15 minutes here. So, what's next? And what were you left with? Like when you got home, did you say, I got to sleep outside in the backyard, or would you like getting to be home? But what's your next quest, man?
Well, the next quest is I probably won't turn around and do the long trail again, but I'm kind of intrigued by the Coos County Trail up there in northern New Hampshire when they let us in there, and I enjoy day hiking around as well. So it's good. These are just pictures that I took along the trail, and you can see you know, the gals from 802 Moncton on the right hand side. They brought me molasses cookies, and the Springfield troop joined us on the Monroe skyline. Randy joined us again. Troop 23 down in the bottom right. They brought some stuff up to Stark's Nest. Just a lot of folks kind of came out. A little terminology, Walt. I know we're getting short on time, but I'd never heard the term PUDs before, but Freight Train told me that's called pointless ups and downs. And you get a lot of that down in the southern Vermont where you don't get too many views. Gut Hook is an application a lot of A2 through hikers use, an online type of thing. I didn't have a lot of mud because it was a pretty dry month of September. Sometimes it can be the longest river in Vermont. I learned the term yogi from Broken Arrow. And when you make reference to something you need and someone gives you something, that's called yogiing. And a little bit like Yogi Bear, I guess, used to take from picnic baskets and that type of thing. So there's a picture there of Philip and I yogiing a couple of beverages from some kind souls up near Belvedere Mountain. So, and I just wanted to touch gear. I've kind of done that a little bit, but this is a little bit of what I had. I've kind of touched most of it. My rain gear, I had a kind of a poncho with a rain jacket. I used a Sawyer water filtration. I augmented that with Aquamira primarily because I still had some left over and I wanted to use it up. I talked about the Garmin InReach. I carried a bear canister. You see that depicted in the left-hand picture where I put all my food in, and then I would put my bear canister several yards away. I talked about my hammock. The Green Mountain Club sells Avenza maps. It's an application with topographic maps. I ended up using that. It was great. I did not take a guidebook with me. I took pictures of the pages and I had them on my cell phone. Again, I brought my cell phone with me. I was kind of surprised that all the time I had a bar or two that I could post on Facebook or in some of the wilderness areas, I would go on to airplane mode or that type of thing. So I didn't have too many problems with that, and that I just rotate a brick with whoever was resupplying me. Obviously a first aid kit. I didn't have any feet problems. You know, I didn't have any blisters. The shoes that or the boots that Eduardo had fitted me at REI worked absolutely perfectly. Somebody asked a question about what was your most valuable piece of equipment, and I would call those my trekking poles, because it was pretty much the downhills could get to be a bit of a killer, and especially coming off the top of Camel Sump down Banforth Ridge all the way to the Winooski River. 6 miles of downhill is about 4,000 feet in elevation. I use darn tough socks. They're made in Vermont. They're darn good. The clothing, you know, shorts and shirts and all that jazz worked out pretty well. My sleeping stuff, I had long johns, and that worked out pretty well. As I say, I had a stove. I had one cooking pot, my teacup, my spoon. I talked about the amount of food I had, and I pulled about 30, 35 pounds. This is some of the hoopla that happened. I've already kind of talked about it, but the blow up dinosaurs showed up at Appalachian Gap, and you know, down in Winooski River, I had signs and all that jazz. So it was like nice hoopla that was going on there. Here's a little bit of my sleeping system. My hammock and tarp. The middle picture anyways was when it started to get cold. I was on Smuggler's Notch, and if you remember from high school physics, there's lots of ways to lose heat, and you lose them all in a hammock. The upper right, you can see those are George Parker and his crew. They, on top of the single chair, they put up their hammocks, and the wind blew pretty strong that night, and radiation, evaporation, conduction, convection, you lose heat all that way. When I got to Smuggler's Notch, I pulled out my space blanket and I kind of wrapped up in that. It did get a little cold for 3 or 4 nights there. Smuggler's Notch, Bear Hollow, Round Top, those are some pretty cold nights. I stopped at Route 15. Dick Seamays gave me a ride up to Johnson Hardware, where I bought myself some hand warmers for my socks. So that worked out pretty well. And that was primarily my sleeping system. More folks along the way. These are folks that I encountered at Appalachian Gap, and yeah, good stuff in that regard as well. And just to talk a little bit about cooking, Walt, again, all I did was boil water, and I would pour it in the Mountain House bags or the oatmeal bag, and I use a stove just to boil water, you know, with a windscreen on it. It worked out pretty well. And the hat on the upper right is just kind of to let things kind of rehydrate. The picture on the left is actually, I did all my cooking from the hammock one morning for breakfast. So hammock camping has lots of advantages to it. More folks that I encountered kind of along the way. Yeah. It was the guy on the top anyways is Justin Hadley. He's a Mount Norris staffer as well that I ran into at Mount Clark and so on. I show this picture because you wonder about what kind of people run a summer camp, and this was Russ engaged with me a couple times on the trail. He was hoping to meet me at Emily Proctor, but I stopped shy, so he had to go over Breadloaf Mountain twice. I nearly killed him a couple times, as he says, to get down to Skyline Lodge, and he packed in some nice food for me with about 3 pounds of chocolate pudding, and that was kind of Russ to do that, and he met me again up in Belvedere and then at Journey's End as well. And this one here, I just wanted to touch. This was a special moment for me. I got to hike with Dick Seamays to the top of Laraway Mountain. Dick's 72 years old, and he made his way up the mountain. Every time we asked him if he was doing okay, he became more stubborn. And by gosh, he got to the top of it, and he was giving us quite a bit of geographical information from on top. And that was a a great deal of fun to walk a few miles with Dick and Barry. So that was a trip up Laraway. And then this is just data that I threw together, guys. It really kind of depicts, I average about 10.25 miles a day, and you can see by the running average that the southern part of the state of Vermont is a little bit easier than the northern part. I certainly understood that. You can see the camps that are depicted in red are where I kind of stealth camped, and the ones in green are where I used the shelter. And that's just I lost 15 pounds, but then I rediscovered ice cream, so I've been putting that back on just a little bit. And again, just to wrap things up, the experiences, some of the toughest parts were the northern part. The south face of Camel's Hump was pretty significant. The north face of the north part of the Chin on Mount Mansfield was difficult as well. I talked about the trail conditions. I didn't really have an awful lot of mud that went along with it. I didn't really have any injuries. I had this one knee problem that going up Camel's Hump, but I posted on Facebook, and Miss Lucy said she'd come to the rescue if I needed it. But I just slapped some Neosporin on it, and I was kind of good to go. Wildlife, I saw some. Here's a porcupine that chased me down the trail, and with some turkeys and various birds, and I did see a bear just shy of the Massachusetts border, a small bear cub. I was actually looking for Mom, but she never appeared, so that worked out pretty well. My favorite campsite had to be the single chair on top of Mad River Glen. That's a wonderful spot to see the sunset and the sunrise. All my meals were pretty decent. I did like the chili mac. That was pretty decent as well. Yeah, Walt, I guess we better catch up with questions before I end this thing.
Yeah. So back to you, Brad. Any more chat, or does anybody want to come forth vocally?
I have a couple comments here. One was that you were talking about Coos County over New Hampshire, and someone mentioned that there's a great fire tower hike in Coos County. And then someone had a question about your cell phone coverage and your cell phone charger. So how did you keep your cell phone charged?
Yeah, I carried a couple bricks with me, and I go on to airplane mode, or I shut the darn thing off if I didn't need it. It actually went pretty well. It wasn't you shouldn't rely on them, but I found it to be pretty easy to do with a couple bricks, and I sent a brick back with Margaret or something of that nature. So I did want to touch Walt wanted me to hit a couple of critical decision making. There's a couple of examples there. I encountered a couple of gals that wanted to hike from Lincoln Gap to Mount Abraham going north. They ended up going south, and I caught them and turned them around, but it cost them a couple miles. And so just be cautious, because trailheads can be dangerous, to make sure that you're going the right way. Ski areas, the same thing. Sometimes some of those ski trails, oh, that looks like the right path to go, but they actually go off in the woods because the Green Mountain Club doesn't believe in nice smooth trails. They want to take you over some rocky stuff. So I did run into some folks that certainly underestimated some of the mileage and terrain. There was one couple that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they still had about 15 miles to go, and that wasn't going to work out terribly well. So, and yeah, but those are, it did get dry north of Belvedere Mountain for me, so I had to kind of ration water a little bit. So, but you're always talking to your neighbors and ensuring what's going on there. So, just Walt, I don't know. I'll hang on as long as people want to, but that's
questions are still coming in.
Oh, okay.
You got some. Yep,
can you
ahead.
touch on the your water filtration system you were using before?
Yeah, that was again, I used a Sawyer filter. Somebody must be drawing in the upper left-hand side of my screen, because it's starting to get black. I use a Sawyer water filter. So basically, in a platypus, there we go. In a platypus or something, you put basically dirty water into, and then it's a gravity feed system. The Sawyer is. This is, if you can see, oops, there we go. That is the filter system right there. It goes between the bag and a couple of I use smart water bottles. So that's what I use, and most of the through hikers as well. I did again augment that with Aqua Mira. Wish to handle that. So that was the question there.
One last question I have is, were there any sections where you got turned around on the trail due to poor markings?
No, I did make one mistake at Sugarbush that cost me a couple 100 yards, but other than that, I paid pretty close attention to the to the white blazes.
I think that's everything.
Okay.
Yeah, Clint, are you, this has been wonderful. I mean, and you and I talked about this on things like gear and experiences. You can go on and on and on. And I hope that you'll be around, of course, to share the story some more. Are you willing?
Yeah. In fact, I did it with Troop 692 the other night out of Williston. I actually did a pack turnout with them, and I'd offer that to the group that's on this Zoom call this evening. If people want me to get down and dirty a little bit with my gear, I threw everything up in the garage and kind of went around with the iPad and showed everybody what I kind of did. So I certainly would be willing and wish to do that. I think it's also important, Walt, that don't be concerned. Again, we live in Vermont right here in our backyard, and the logistics for us, it might sound a little daunting, but it's really not that bad. I ran into a couple of folks anyways. Bumblebee is one. She started at Route 4 and left her car there, and she walked all the way up to Middlebury Gap. She turned around and went back, moved her car, moved up to Middlebury, and did that flip-flopping all the way. So she basically hiked north and then hiked south, moved her car, hiked north and south again. And she really did quite a bit of work in that regard. And there was another guy, Mike Record. He would hike and move his bicycle, and so he shuttled himself with a bike. And so that was pretty interesting how, again, out-of-staters, people that aren't here anyways, they really pay attention to the logistics, try to get as much as they can my screen went blank for some reason.
Yeah, I think we're going to wind up here. And with thanks to you, Clint, and happy trails.
Okay.
And thanks to everyone else online, and to be continued, every last one of you. Thanks again, Clint, for a great night.
You're welcome. And I'll hang on if people have questions or want to chat anymore. But I just threw up a slide that none of this would be possible without these folks that supported me along the way. And that starts with Margaret and Billy and Sarah Lynn and Francesca. They kept me oriented throughout the trip, and Mark with all his ideas about marketing, and Russ meeting me everywhere, keeping track of my nightly pings, and lots of friends along the way. And I just end up that, there was 214 people that somehow got inspired and donated to the cause. And I'm eternally grateful for that as well. So.
All right. Well, and we thank you, Clint. What a guy for us all, and happy trails, and to many more trails, my friend.
Indeed.
Okay.
And again, I'll hang on. If anybody's got any questions, you can go off mute.
Anybody? Everybody's thanking you, Clint. I can see that. But I think most,
Clint.
Yeah. Hey, Brock.
Hey, I was even nice and I didn't heckle you at all.
I know you did. I appreciate that, my friend. What do you have to share?
Nothing. It was very enjoyable.
Yeah. Really great to see a lot of people again.
Oh my
And that's-
goodness. Yes. Holy cow.
That's another great thing you did, Clint. You brought us together again in
Yeah.
in the dead of winter.
Nice job, Clint.
Sounds like Mark's got some walk-off music. Hey, there's Dick Seamays. I saw you on Laraway Mountain, Dick. How are you?
Yeah.
You've recovered from that, haven't you, my friend?
Yes, I have.
Good.
Really.
And for those of you who are still online, if you
It
have
looks pretty good.
for presentations that we can have like this again, the Alumni Association is very eager to hear those thoughts and suggestions. So just feel free to message us through Facebook